Welcome back to For the Love of Humanity. This is a series on alchemy. And in this episode, I want to talk about the three, four stages of alchemy, as well as the 7 stages, and how I have experienced them in my own archetypal transformation journey. And I believe that when we are aware of them and we look, we fit in there in our own way. We all have this subjective experience of this, right? And there's various schools of thought, but basically when you have a look, there's the 3, as in the black, white, and red, the negredo, the albedo, and the rubido stages of alchemy. And then some discuss this fourth stage that's in between albedo and rubido, which is citrinitas. This is the yellow stage. And so in alchemy, there's the first stage, which is the negredo. This is the dark night of the soul. It's seen as the shadow confrontation, the aspect of the chaos. This can be like the dualistic masculine and feminine sort of rolling around in creation, creating this symbiotic experience, sometimes not symbiotic, sometimes not moving in unison, sometimes not working together. But either way, this is the aspect of sort of just living life. For me, this was the stage where I sort of became aware to the repetition of certain pains. I became frustrated with the repetition of certain pains. And I was in a habituated practice of noticing something that I wanted on the outside that would grab my attention enough to demonstrate a pattern where I was not allowing myself to expand and grow towards bigger or new or other things. And then I would be shown sort of my own spiraling. And so that's like the dark night of the soul. And I've gone through a few of those. So this Negredo stage is like the dark stage, the shadow, the mirror, the projection, where we don't realize we're just projecting our internal state on the external. And it is there for us to see. You project your internal state on the external long enough, you start to see patterns, and then you start to see scenarios that are happening over and over again, and hopefully it reflects back to us in a way that we start to question, well, why is this happening over and over again? The common denominator here is me. What is the problem here? What's causing me this dissatisfaction or this sense of non-ease or dis-ease? And this is the different like complexes we can develop. This is the archetypes playing out in a way that we don't necessarily see, but they continue showing up. This is like the saboteur, right? The inner sabotager, the inner child that's holding the pain. This is like your internal beast, your ego, your personal impulses, the pain, the reactions, your reactive behavior, your knee-jerk behavior, your greed, your sins. Really, I mean, sins, you can call them sins, but it's also like just where you're not fully aware of your behavior when pressed, when feeling under-resourced, when feeling survival is threatened. This is the repressed, the hidden urges, what's under the mask, the discontentment with self. And this is like a chaotic experience. This is where everything is just sort of swimming under the surface, and we're not necessarily aware of what's in the subconscious. This is like the nightmares and the dream state where we're yelling and screaming and nothing's coming out of our mouth. This is where we feel the pain, but we don't necessarily understand it, see it, recognize it, or know how to affect change. This is where we feel like we could have been left in a pit, and why me? Feeling very victimized by life, feeling like I don't know where the light is. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. I've fallen into the rabbit hole. Everything feels upside down. Why is this happening to me? This is like the illness, the car accident, um, the wake up calls, the breaking through where the shadow's starting to bust through. So, if we don't, some of us are like, I want to do the shadow work. I want to see, let me see everything. And we want to go in with a flashlight. We also don't necessarily have to like pry open the doors of our basement because it's coming up, it's leaking out, it's the stench in the basement, it's the putrefaction, it's the breaking down of what's underneath, it's the stench of what hasn't been addressed and what's now dying and needing to decompose. And so that's the darkness. And that is leads into the albedo, which is the light, the commune between the conscious and the subconscious. This is the lunar dawn. This is the essence also of the soul imagination, when more space and more light and a more conscious revelation takes place. But at first, this could just be the stark realization of like, holy shit, what's going on with my life? What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I here for? What is this for? This albedo state is like the relationship with self, the language of self. It's the way, it's the illumination and the elucidation of how you really are. It's the sobering reality, the waking up the night after. It's the for me, it was the stage of like being in the shower and washing my hair and being tormented by the steady stream of thoughts. And if I looked at the thinker thoughts, the thoughts that were thinking, it was almost like, oh my God, has this always been happening? This is exhausting. This is crazy. How long has this narrative been running this wild? Oh my God, I'm hearing it. It's hearing me. It knows I'm watching it. Like, the the light of awareness that feels so tinny, like waking up on an operating table, then the light just shining in your face. And as I said in my previous episodes, this is why metaphor and archetype is important, or this is why that's the language we speak in, because maybe you don't resonate with some of the things I'm saying, but some of them really make a feeling. They really strike a chord, right? Like the sobering next morning after, the light on the operating table that's shining and you wake up mid-surgery. That's the feeling of like, holy crap, this is what's here. Going in the basement, turning the light on to reveal you've been hoarding for 10 years and you've never actually looked at all the shit you're accumulating. And I say that with love because I have many hoarders in my family and I understand the emotional experience behind it. And I've had my own experiences of hoarding. We all do. We all hoard certain things, right? Unless we've become very committed to a minimalist lifestyle. And that's a whole other journey in itself that I think is an incredible exercise. However, we're talking about the albedo state here. This is the sense of clarity, the conscious awareness. This is the being aware of the observer at a certain point. So you're observing the darkness, and then you become aware of the observer that's observing the darkness. And you become aware of the duality within and the duality of the mind within, the higher and lower aspects, the ego mind, the ego self, the ego voice, the voice of how we talk to ourselves when we're not doing it right, the domineering voice inside, the way we judge other people, the way we judge ourselves. We get to see all of this. We get to see the symbols, the ego. We get to also open up to our imagination, right? We get to open up to the various identities within, the version of us that we feel so good in, the version of us that's ego driven that makes us salivate for the stuff that we know is like cheap and shitty that we want anyway, right? We get to wake up to all of these things. We get to wake up to our guide. We have to learn how to trust that guide, because at a certain point we're like, I don't want to get tricked by the ego again. It's led me into these binge nights. I don't want to do that anymore. Like, this is the clarity on the different voices. This is the clarity on frequency and tone and programs. This is when we begin to get clear on when we go to certain social situations, the energy just feels off, or we don't like it, or we leave a social interaction, we feel polluted. And again, feeling like, oh gosh, this is right for me. This is not right for me. This is definitely not right for me. I want to stay away from that. I don't like that. I don't like the way that feels. This is coming clear on how things feel to us. This is coming clear on how certain thoughts feel when we think them, right? This is the clarity. This is the allness. This is the sort of awakening. This is the awakening to the inner child. This is the awakening to our innocence and what happened to our innocence. And then we realize, like, what the heck's been going on? I've been away and you've been running the show and you've been, you know, running us into the ground. Like there can be this fight for who's responsible and who should take the wheel, and that awareness, right? And but we should be grateful at that stage because the light has turned on and we have awareness and we can see underneath, we can see the innocence. And then as we go into the next phase, which I'm going to talk about the yellow phase, because this feels like the phase where we start to in spirit. We start to bring in the spirit and we see our own solar light. We see our own inner purity. We see our own essence. And some call this the Christ essence. Some call this like Christ, not as in necessarily Jesus Christ, but the Christ impulse, the um, Christ being like the higher self, the higher form, the exalted nature, the goodness, the innate purity, the innate divinity, the innate experience of our pure innocence as just who we are, our divinity, our connection to source. This is us being able to see that. This is where we can focus on objectivity and our conscious relatedness towards wholeness. This can be where we relate to the whole of humanity in general, where we start to see purpose. We start to orient ourselves towards that spiritual inspiration. We are inspired, we are inspirited, we are ignited. There's this transference, countertransference that can take place. There's this allowing for sublimation of certain impulses, crutches, ways of being, patterns of self-soothing that maybe are just cheap ones that help us get through a moment, but ultimately long term they're not the healthiest. So that's when we start to choose the higher and choose what's better long term and choose the sustainable and choose the higher association to be inspired and choose our inspiration. This is like, you know, knowing that gossip can be salacious, but deciding that it feels like a hangover after we engage in it, deciding that the gossip and the judgment and the poison that we, put at other people, we're ultimately creating within our own bodies. So we would rather choose not create it in the first place. This is the choosing not to partner with the things that make us feel sick or at ill ill at ease, dis-ease, right? This would be the recognition and action from the greater good, the realizing that we're all connected in some way and nothing we do gets really swept under the rug. It's our obligation, and it's our joyous obligation to purify ourselves, to purify our actions, to take responsibility, to be accountable. This is when we become accountable, and this is where we start to choose that more and more. And this solar light, this inherent soul connection and spirit connection starts to guide us more and more, and we hand off old ways, um, ignorant ways that were in the dark, ways that were reactionary, for ways that are inspired action, ways that are reflective, contemplative ways of being, instead of just impulsively reacting and having our buttons pressed. We are responsible for our buttons, and we deactivate our buttons, and we choose a way that feels more aligned, plus a way that feels like it's connected to generally having love for other people and being part of that oneness. Okay, and then that leads into the rubido stage. Rubido. This is the soul, SOL. This is sun. This is God. This is, in quotations, Red King. This is the emergence. This is the attaining of spiritual liberation. This is the final stage of the magnum opus, the great work of alchemy. This is where we start to see that all of this refinement has created something that is incredible. This is the unification of the two making the third. This is like the meaning of consciousness. This is the symbolism of co-creating with the all there is, with co-creation. This is the spiritual symbolic graduation. This is life. This is wholeness. This is the essence out. This is like acting from your essence. This is the self as unified creator, reunion, reunification, the philosopher's stone, the purification of the next, or the purification, sorry, of what is not you, of the density, of the false, of the lies, of the sludge, of the vitriol, of the venom, of the poison, of the dis-ease, of the structures that are crumbling because they are not founded in who you really are, or they can no longer come with you. Maybe they were right for another time period, but they're not right anymore. This is the bracing that you've grown out of, and now it needs to be alchemized. It needs to be burned up. And so those are the 4 stages, but they correlate with several other stages. And so this is the transformation stage, right? So again, the Negrito stage is about the confession. It's about coming to the awareness. It's about being self-led to the awareness of, oh, this isn't working. This is breaking down. So the 7 stages start with calcination. This is the heating, the decomposing. This is like the fever in the body, the breakdown of the ego. The ego burrs, like the bits of burr that the ego is creating, these burrs, these points of frustration, points of coming to a head. This is self-sabotage. This is like the festering agitation under the surface, right? Then that leads to the dissolution, the breakdown, the breakaway. This people characterize as the forest, deep water, the free fall. Could be the cave. This is when people describe the soul as like a barren desert. Like when they go into their inner world and there's nothing there yet because they haven't nurtured it and they haven't been there and they haven't watered it and they haven't spent time there and they haven't put their energy of life force there. This is sometimes we don't want to go inside because what's in there is painful and it's dark and it's right. So the dissolution part is the illusion is starting to show. We might feel a bit crazy. There's the quiet observation of the negative and the positive. There's the spiritual stirring, which is partly what creates the movement, right? There's that impulse, the decomposition is happening because this is not coming with us. So again, you can feel comfort in the stage that there's a certain amount taken care of. The decomposition already happens. Look at fruit, you put it outside and I have a compost. Like I see the decomposition happening in front of me and it's creating rich soil for my plants. This is where there's like an inner tension, where there's this need to look and sort of wake up. And then this could be characterized by like illness, crisis, letting go, unraveling, being forced to let go of something, having something taken away from you. And then from there, we have the separation. So this is for introspection, for awareness, for analysis. This is the hermiting phase. It's where you let go of the crutches. You let go of trying to keep functioning in the way you were. You let go of holding the walls. This is you're being carried out, and you're no longer trying to grab a door frame on the way out. You're just going. This is like potentially where the tantrum might happen, and this is the true inner rage. And you have to feel it to heal it, and it must surface for the work to be complete. You must go through this phase of separation. It could feel like the ripping apart. It could feel like the splitting. It could feel like inner torture a little bit, right? So we've gone from calcination, the heating up, the fermenting, the festering, the agitation, pay attention, something's happening here. Like my whole body, I've got a fever of like 100 and something degrees. Like then we go into the dissolution. Everything starts to get broken down. You start to feel a little bit delusional. You start to feel a little bit loopy. Things are starting to separate. You're coming unglued. Then we go into the separation where it actually separates and we have to pull the pieces apart so we can see what's actually here. This is where we could feel like reclusive, where we have to look at discernment. We really have to use our discernment around anger and grief. This is where we isolate so we can see the self. So we can see the self away from influence of external. We can just see bare basic what's here. This is where we take stock. We separate things. We get to see the true inner rage. We have to see the feelings to heal it. We have to see what's under the covers. We have to see what's in the basement. We have to see, this is where we start to actually bring some light in, right? Then there's the conjunction, which comes after the sort of clarification, the work that's already started to happen. And this is where we start to integrate and combine and simmer. This is where, we would bring in the spiritual impulse, and the spirit starts to go to work on us. It starts to reveal truths to us. It starts to reveal symbolism and archetypal things. So we start to get fed a little bit of the new, a little bit of the new. Think about your sourdough, and this would be like feeding the sourdough a little bit, right? You're feeding it more so that it can start to create from that. This is the combining the inner space, the cauldron, the accepting all parts. Let's bring everything into the fold. This is the seeing of the authentic self and acceptance of the authentic self. More bubbles up during this part. This is more bubbles up to be looked at and purified. But it's more easeful. This awareness is different than the first like dissolution and breakdown and the first separation, because you're gaining wisdom, you're gaining ease, you're gaining awareness, you're gaining in self-love and compassion, because you're seeing not only all of the dark parts and all of the ways that you feel as though you've failed yourself, or you've experienced failure, or you've been victimized, or you've hurt other people. Like, you're seeing where you're the victim and the villain. You're seeing all these aspects, and you're appreciating that we all have this experience where we all have to come to reckon with what's inside. We all have to have this introspection moment, and some of us hold it off and hold it at bay for a really long time. But we have more love for ourselves, and we see more. And as we bring in more of the spirit and the soul, we know the truth that we still are pure, that we still are love, that we still have a right to be here, that we still are whole, that we contain the completion and the redemption. We contain the ability to redeem ourselves already. We're already forgiven. That's when that adage of truth comes in, and we really feel it. We are already forgiven, and we start to forgive others. And then what follows is the fermentation stage. This is the start of the rebirth. This is the fermentation, the gestation, the new coming in. The new is now created because we added a little bit in the conjunction phase. Our spirit got added in, and we're now letting more of our spirit take over and grow and be the blueprint and be the North Star and be the thing that starts to guide us. We let go of what used to be guiding us, our impulses, our cravings, our addictions, our patterns, our unconscious behaviors. We let go of that. We've started to transmute that. We've started to burn it up. We've started to turn the heat up on it and burn away what isn't true or real about it. And then we started to add in the spirit that was the truth, that was the reality, that was the essence of who we really are. And we allow that to take over the transformation. We allow that to become bigger than the aspects that we thought were us. And we allow the truth of who we are. We allow the inspirited, inspired version of us, the growing version of us, the version of us that feels resourced, like it could love anybody that God puts in front of us or that we come across. That version starts to take over more and more in this fermentation process. That's the gestation. We're creating this new aspect of ourselves. We're germinating. We're inspiriting. This is where the grape is starting to turn to wine. We refine ourselves. We're starting to get the full-bodied expression based on the wisdom, the layered wisdom, the acceptance, the self-love and acceptance. Like, that is such a crucial ingredient. That is such a effervescent ingredient. That's fermentation, effervescence. That's when we start to feel all the bubbles. So not only did more darkness bubble up, but we learned to accept the darkness that did bubble up. So now we got all kinds of bubbles. This is champagne toast, baby. We've accepted the decomposition of the older self, but we have more power, more assistance, more stability at this part. And we just allow the old parts to rot. We surrender to the die off and the burning off of these parts, because we now have enough energy to keep refining, keep going, keep remaining pure during this whole process. We know we are bigger than what we are shown. We know we are bigger than the little memories that bubble up at this point that in the past would make us think, oh, I'm not changing, I'm not growing, I'm just still that same old person that does that horrible thing, or whatever. We don't even see ourselves that way anymore. The spiritualization has started to refine even more and show us our gold. It shows us the value of life. It shows us the world in a new way. We have new ambition. We have guidance from spirit. We have guidance from the inner world. This is where we're doing the inner work. We have the intention. We have the energy to keep going. We have the energy to actually refine and perfect and really take off with it and make the gold. We allow consciously the letting go. We allow the conscious surrender. We actually start to enjoy. We actually bring joy in. We create joy from the inside at this point, which is in joy. We are living in joy and we are enjoying things because the joy is coming from within. We let go of the lesser for the greater. We taste inner peace, love, and bliss. We taste it and we let it influence us. We let it take hold. We let it bring us higher. And then it's the coagulation. And the coagulation, similar to the body's ability to form blood clots. We've become free of that lower mind and we've become free of our patterns, and the soul really unites more and more. And this is like, we've initiated through this process. We've unified the duality. We've unified internally, and we've created this beautiful golden elixir out of all of this combination. This is the gold. This is the red stage. This is like, we've purified and now we've become whole again. And this is who we are presenting ourselves to the world. This is the rebirth. This is who I am now. Now that I've used all of this stuff of who I was, I've decomposed it, I've put it together, I'm creating the new self from it. And what I'm creating is incredible. What I'm creating is so big. What I'm creating from this is like the exalted version. And it had to come from feeding off all of those other parts, all of those lower parts. This is where I've allowed all of my veggies to decompose over the winter, and it's become the most incredible soil that I'm going to give to my new plants, to my new growth. This is the reward. This is the attainment. This is the unified point of two opposites. This is working together. And I just want to emphasize that unification doesn't necessarily mean homogeneous and homogeneity in the sense that there's this melting pot. It can very much mean like a melting pot and just what we think of when people are melting down gold or smelting metallics. But it can also mean the interwoven experience of separate things, but knowing at the very ultimate level everything is connected anyway. So knowing that everything is connected, but appreciating the experience of their separateness and watching the interplay and their mutual reception and mutual receptivity and the synchronicity of interplay happening. So I do want to say that, like for instance, the garden analogy and the soil and the decomposing and the fermentation and all of that to do with the alchemy, producing this rich, unified experience. And then also being very aware that there are cycles where we're always bringing in new information and it's always bumping up against the existing experience and the existing structures and the existing belief systems and the existing ways of doing life. And we get to consciously make the choice of how we integrate that. I mean, at some point, we're not conscious of all the ways that it integrates within, but we're more in the awareness of how to integrate these aspects together and how to integrate new information and how to disintegrate old information. And I'm going to talk about this more when I release the counterpart to the balanced masculine, which is the feminine florescence. And that's sort of talking about the perpetual bloom and florescence and the natural cycles and the experience of wholeness in a different way, and knowing that we're going through a cyclical process. So there's always the animation and decomposition process happening. There's always cycles happening where we're going to have to decompose things that don't work anymore, and we're going to erect new things that do work and support us, and that we don't unify and then become stagnant. There's always this experience of new growth happening, and that's what it is to live on earth, to live within these natural cycles at this point. And so I want to talk about the fact that there are places to go after this. And it doesn't always happen in like this cycle and this order. Like, even though I've outlined my understanding of alchemy and how I felt myself go through this process, this literal internal process of alchemy, and I believe that we all go through this, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, and we can partner with it. And we all have the ability to expand into this level of awareness of how we can program, deprogram, how we can look at our belief systems, break them down, and we can create belief systems that support us. And I'm not talking about some delusional way of like, oh, well, I'm going to, erect this belief system that completely bypasses everything in my human experience. That's not what I'm talking about at all. But I'm also not willing to say me as a person should come in and tell you the limits of what you're able to create. That's not for me. That wouldn't be my business, and that's not something I would support anyway. My limits shouldn't affect your life, just like anybody else's perceived limitations on the human experience are not going to be influencing mine. So the process of alchemy for me, it was about like looking at what's in the basement, clearing out what's in the basement, repairing the foundation, or pouring an entirely new foundation. And that's different for everybody. Some people may need to pour a new foundation. Some people might need to demo all the stuff they have. Like, and that can be a later discussion, but that's almost like breaking down the identity, the ego, almost to a point of not like, there's these meditations where like no head, we don't have a head. Like, basically we're letting go of everything we've identified, identifying with nothing, which I can say from experience feels like a very interesting place when people talk about the void or people talk about becoming detached. It can feel for some people like disassociation. So there is this spot that some people can get to where they, release all of these attachments, release all these associations. I don't think that's the state we stay in. Again, I believe that things are very cyclical, and they're cyclical for a reason. So we need to go through phases of dissolution, disillusion, and dissolving. And so we have these moments where perhaps we've decided, you know what, this whole section of belief system, like the way I believed spirituality was, the way I believed religion affected my spirituality, for instance, this whole thing has some seeds sown in it that aren't healthy for me. They don't match with where I'm going. They don't seem to feel life-giving. So I'm going to go through and dig it all up. I'm going to excavate it, and I'm going to pour new foundations. And then in other aspects, you might look at sections of your life and feel like these are really healthy. These are really life-giving. There's parts of this that make sense. Like, there are things and wisdom that was passed on to me from family, from experience, that actually still holds true and is still a really great fortifying structure for me to keep. But there are ways in which I've enacted it or had a perspective around it that could shift, that could be more expansive. Like, while I believe that I am able to create with limitless potential, there is some scaffolding required for me to operate within that without getting lost in the contemplation of how vast that actually is, right? So sometimes we got to repair the foundation, and there's just some tweaks that need to happen. It's some parging, it's some crack, whatever. Sometimes it's demoing and pouring new foundation. Either way, how are the bones, right? And then we build it. And this can, again, be happening simultaneously with a certain chunk of your belief systems, not your whole world. I mean, I've again had experience where large sections, if not whole sections, felt as though they were being excavated at once. And it felt really, at times, unnerving because there wasn't much to hold on to. I really, what is real, in crumbling all of that? What is real? What is the point? What is stripping all of that back can be a really precarious place for sure. But then also coming to terms with, oh, I'm the creator of this experience. I'm co-creating, but I am the creator of this experience. So what would I choose in terms of beliefs? What are the most supportive belief systems that I can choose? Because I'm already buying into this belief system, that belief system, whatever. Some of them being natural truths that I know deep in my core and in my bones, and some of them being adopted truths. And we just, it's our right to make sure that the truths that we live by, that the belief systems that we buy into are self-supportive, self-serving, and they add to our own sovereignty and self-regulation, while at the same time adding to our experience of relationship with others, enjoying and communing with others, living in integrity, knowing that we're connected with others. So, at a greater level, your own spirituality, your own sovereignty, your own divinity really is a gift and an act of service when it's coming from that place of like ultimate expansion and love, because you wouldn't do unto others as you wouldn't have done unto yourself. So we're not necessarily attempting to control others or hurt others, or, so uh, I get that it can be a funny place when we start to think, oh, we create our belief systems. And what if that's super um, self-serving and actually to the expense of others? I think we look at it from an entirely different lens when we start to create it from a place of integrity, from a place of love, and we certainly trust that we're doing our best. So knowing that this is a simultaneous experience where we might be excavating some areas, we might be parging some areas, we might be building new foundation in some areas. This is all in the different areas of our belief systems and how we support ourselves through life. We assess our situation, right? And that's our right to assess our situation and our right to rebuild our belief systems. And each person is going to go about this differently. Each person is going to feel this differently. Each person is going to feel supported by different things, especially depending on their previous experiences. Some people might need support in areas that other people just seem to have it figured out. It's already working really well for them. It's already something that's supporting their life. And so we start to begin, once we've done the excavation, once we've alchemized, once we've like looked at the crap in the basement, and we've started to clarify, purify, purge, get clarity on what we actually do want, purge the things that were motivated by things that we're not motivated by anymore, or things that were motivated by people pleasing behaviors, or things that were motivated by a need to feel safe. And now that we feel safe and secure, or now that we're internally motivated, what falls off? What was external that we don't necessarily need? And from that vantage point, we build a whole different framework to our house. We build a whole different structure. We build a whole different set of scaffolding to support what we want to create in life. And that comes with asking, well, what do I want to create? What is the highest? What can I reach for? What are the belief systems that I can put in place that are the most expansive, that allow me to grow and evolve, that aren't necessarily limiting me, but that are supporting me so that I don't get overwhelmed at the pure possibility and potential as well? And so you check in, and my advice would be to not let another human being get in your car and drive it. That's for you. That's for you and your higher self. This is a right. And it is your right to self determine. It is your right to self heal. It is your right to self diagnose. It is your right, like, and again, not saying we don't seek out help or we don't find trusted, wise counsel of people that we know aren't trying to, you know, get in and drive our car or make decisions for us, or, that their advice to us isn't going to be primarily intended for their benefit, right? When we can see that whoever we're getting advice from, there's not an ulterior motive to the advice they're giving us. And we can feel that. That's an energetic thing when we can feel that somebody is not necessarily trying to, what I call it, is override our intuition for the sake of their own egoic need to feel right, to feel healed, whatever it is. So when we seek out that wise counsel, we're just mindful of the fact that we're still driving our car. We're still sovereign in our vehicle. We're still the one, steering this ship, even though we ask for wise counsel, even though we ask for support, even though we check in for reflection and mirror and like, hey, what do you think? Given how you know me and I trust your perspective, what do you see in this situation? So and I think it's our rite of passage to come to terms with these things, to come to pass, to come and see what we have not seen before. It's it can be an incredibly painful experience, excavating and alchemizing and looking at the shadow and working with the shadow. But on the other side of it, we don't necessarily look at it as a painful experience anymore. We look at it as a rite of passage. We look at it as, yeah, I wouldn't want to skip that or outsource that to somebody else, because it's so deeply intimate and it's so deeply a part of who I am. And I get to rewrite the story based on that. I get to write the story based on what I've gleaned from those experiences. It brought me here, and I get the celebration of that too. And this is a concept for me that I keep coming back to, is like weaving this golden tapestry. And I get to weave the tapestry because I live the threads, and the threads get to be perspectivized, and the threads get to be reknown in new ways that shine them up even more, that elevate them up even more. And I weave gold out of my experiences. And so it's your right. It's your rite of passage. This is your autobiography. This isn't somebody writing a biopic on you and choosing how they, decide to slant the story. You get to do that. And it's a really cathartic experience. So once you go through this alchemy, it's not that it's necessarily over. It's that you become an alchemist and you know how to do this. And your energetic metabolism and your emotional metabolism and your ability to metabolize and break down and burn off and purify and get up again and become resilient and take the lessons and take the unification and take all that you've gleaned and pour it into the next thing is really the gift. And that's that cycle, that mastery becomes your next level. And from there, you get to like create a vision, and you can create a vision the whole way along. You can evoke your ability to use your imagination, and how can I see myself doing this? And how can I have the courage, the strength, the balance, the next level of visioning? How can I be clear on what I want to create next? How do I create my reality going forward? Like, you get to do all that, and you can do that while you're breaking things down. It's just sometimes it gets a little muddled as to what's breaking down, what's staying, what's going, what's being broken down, what's being elevated. But that's all a process that you get to suss out, that you get to feel through. And I think what's really key is to know it is a process, to know that you're going to be okay, to know that you come through the other side stronger every time. Don't doubt it. And that when we're mid process, that's kind of when we want to pull out, and we want to be like, ooh, this is too much. I don't know. I'm not on the right. I'm feeling on the edge of crazy. I'm feeling like I'm losing it. I'm feeling like, and sometimes that's the surrender moment, the free fall. Like, I'm just going to turn my back to the edge of the cliff and just do a backflip off it, and know that I'm okay. Know that I'm going to be caught. Know that, and I like not, this is metaphor. I don't know if I need to say that, but that's metaphor. Like, I need to release. I need to let go. I need to surrender. And again, part of the cycle, because then there will be times where you're putting the gas on, you're igniting, you're expanding, you're building, you're moving forward at a quickening pace. So the next episode is going to be about intuition and visioning, and how you can see the themes coming up in your life. I'm going to have another episode about the teacher and student within, and that's how I've really learned to see, what am I working on right now? What's literally coming up for me? So instead of like having somebody tell me what my themes are, I'm able to assess where I'm at and really look at, what am I working with right now? So, like the last 2 years, for instance, a quick example, I was working on defensiveness. I could see how it was coming up. I thought I'd mastered it in many ways. I had. However, there was a deeper layer, a deeper instinctual, knee jerk, impulsive layer that I was able to keep under control pretty well. But there was parts of it that were coming up that I was like, you know what? I just don't like the feeling of that experience. And if I'm a co-creator and I get to curate my experience, some of this I feel can be alchemized. And I'm not side skirting a human experience, and I'm not bypassing a human condition, but I'm also not limiting myself based on what other people think is possible. And I think it's possible to have this experience in a more elevated way. So I'm going to. So those are the next few episodes. Thank you for joining me. If you want to check out more of my little bits and bobs, I'm over on Instagram at FEMMYST, FEMMYST. I'm on TikTok. If you think somebody you know could benefit from hearing this episode, please do share. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, if you want to connect somehow, reach out. You know where to find me, social media. Thank you very much. Enjoy your life. Bye-bye.